nothing that you get told about China in Western media is accurate. A very common myth, for instance, that everyone has heard is the social credit score. If you go to China and you ask people, what is your social credit score? No one will have any idea of what you're speaking about. It's gotten efficient to a stage that people, that has no equivalent in the West. If you buy something often in China, it will arrive to your door within, less than 1 hour.
I've had this perception of China for the longest time of a sort of low-cost, low-end technology manufacturing hub for the world. But actually, over the last 5 to 10 years, it's crept up on us. They've moved up.
China is one of the most decentralized countries in the world. Money speaks a lot. So if you look at how the Chinese budget is being spent, 80% of the expenses are at the local levels. If you compare with France, my country, it's the exact opposite. It's 80% central, 20% local. What people misunderstand about the CCP, actually in China it's called the CPC, the Communist Party of China, is that its fundamental role is an HR organization.
Arnaud Bertrandt, thank you very much for making time to join us today. It's my pleasure to host you on the Archie podcast.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so Noel, you've got a really interesting background. You've got a background as an entrepreneur in technology, and you're currently residing still in China?
I'm in Malaysia right now.
You're
8 years in China.
8 years
now I'm
in China.
based in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Yeah.
What did you do in China, and what brings you to Malaysia right now?
So basically, my journey is that, so I'm French, nobody is perfect. And I studied in Switzerland. I created my first company there with my wife. And then we moved to London, where we managed the business during 5 years there. Then we sold the company, and we had the opportunity to, basically start a new life. And my wife is Chinese. And it was a time in our life when we wanted children, and we, as a mixed couple, we wanted to raise them in both cultures, and we came to the conclusion that it was much easier to do that in China than it was in France, simply because we have French schools in China and you don't have Chinese schools in France. So that was the basic thinking, and then so we moved to China. And I created 2 companies there. My first company was called Love in VR, which was the first VR dating app. And so I worked on that during 2 to 3 years. But then I quickly realized that VR was not, getting popular like the way we expected. And especially for dating, you need, quite a big cohort of both men and women, and you did not have that. And so I decided to, stop that because the timing was just wrong. And when in China, I experienced traditional Chinese medicine, and it worked for me. I had, a lot of problems with headache, migraines, and it really cured it for me, taking, traditional Chinese medicine formulas. That was the idea for my next business, trying to educate people about what TCM can, how TCM can help, how it can complement modern medicine, and selling products around that. And so I started that other business, and then I realized that for that business, the type of people I needed to hire were people who obviously knew a lot about TCM, but knew also how to speak to the West. And those type of profiles are surprisingly difficult to find in China. Obviously, you have plenty of people who know about TCM, but the speaking to the West part is not obvious. Most Chinese don't speak English. and so on and so forth. And that's why we decided to move to Malaysia, which is a country with a very significant Chinese population. Around 20-25% of the population here is Chinese. And the official language of the country is English. Everyone speaks English. They're very used to, evolve in an international context. That's why after 8 years to China, that was, a professional decision. We decided to move here in Malaysia, to continue developing that business.
What was the nature of the initial businesses that you started? Because my impression, if I recall correctly, that they were some kind of technology-based business, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So it was called HouseTrip. So we were the first marketplace for holiday renters. So basically Airbnb, but actually 1 year before Airbnb. So we were the first of this kind, with, hosts on one side and guests on the other side. And we did the whole startup journey. We got backed by 3 VCs. Actually, the first time that the 3 top European VCs invested in the same company was HouseTrip. So for people who know about VCs, it was Index Ventures, Accept Partners, and Bertrandt Capital. So they jointly invested. And we went from, my wife and I in our living room to 250 employees. So really the whole journey. And then finally we sold the company to TripAdvisor back in 2015.
Looking for a secure, trusted way to buy, sell, and hold Bitcoin? Gemini has been leading the way since 2014. Founded by the Winklevoss twins to be a security-first, fully regulated Bitcoin platform. With Gemini, your Bitcoin is protected with enterprise-grade security, backed by insurance and Type 2 certifications for SOC 1 and SOC 2. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or a long-time hodler, Gemini gives you the tools to stack sats and build generational wealth your way. From simple one-tap buys to advanced charts and trading features, it's all here. Buy, sell, and hold securely. That's Gemini. Gemini. Bitcoin with confidence. Need cash without selling your Bitcoin? With DeBiFi, you borrow against your Bitcoin, non-custodial, multi-sig escrow, and you keep your keys. No banks, no selling, just institutional grade liquidity with terms up to 2 years and APRs as low as 9%. All transactions are signed using private keys on your own device. Using a 3 of 4 multi-sig setup, 3 out of 4 keys must approve every transaction, giving you control, transparency, and peace of mind. Whether you're a hodler, miner, small business, or treasury team, DeBiFi gives you the cash you need now without giving up your Bitcoin upside or triggering a taxable event. Get liquidity, keep exposure, and stay secure. That's DeBiFi. DeBiFi, your Bitcoin, your money.
As someone who has his roots firmly in, I guess, Western Europe, and then you've lived such a long time in China, was there anything that struck you as breaking the mold and your preconceptions of what China was?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I grew up not knowing a lot about China. I grew up in the south of France with zero connection to the country. And my impression of China was the same that, everyone is taught in the West, right? It's a horrible communist country, dictatorship with zero freedom. I mean, the whole thing. And so that's what I knew about China. Not before moving there, because I had been with my wife for quite a long time, but at that stage, maybe 10 years almost. So I had been to China a lot, but actually moving there and living there, I really realized the extent to which we were misled about the country. Almost virtually nothing that you get told about China in Western media is accurate. There is an amazing distortion of what the country is. I don't think most of it is, on purpose. It's just people, most journalists who write about the country just were raised the way I was, and so analyze China through the same frame that I would have if I hadn't gone to the country. But when you go there, when you start to understand the culture, the history, when you start to learn the language, when you travel a lot in the country, I traveled to all the Chinese provinces except for 3. Then you really, start to understand the country, which is not easy because it's such a different culture, such a different, and it's a culture that evolved, so separately from the rest of the world, which makes it so unique with, even basic concepts like good and bad is different in China. They have yin yang, which is nothing is truly good, nothing is truly bad. You need to find balance and harmony. So it's a really, really different way of thinking. And I think that you really need that whole to almost completely re-educate yourself in order to understand the country in the right way before. And ideally, anyone who writes about China should have gone through that process in order to report on things in a way that is fair. But that's the case of almost no journalist or no writer about China today.
So you mentioned a framework through which we in the West typically try to understand China, or at least we're informed about China by our media. How would you define that framework, and what were some of the surprises in your living experience in China that broke that framework?
I guess my first realization that something was very wrong with that framework. I had always been told that Chinese people really hate their government and that they really yearn for freedom and liberation from that tyranny and so on and so forth. When I first got with my wife, I assumed that was our case. We didn't really speak about politics or anything, but that's what I assumed. And then I remember an experience that really moved me quite profoundly when we were watching the 2008 Olympics opening ceremony, and she started crying. And my wife is really not an emotional person, like very pragmatic. It was probably the first time that I saw her cry. And then I understood, what that meant for her. It meant, China, after such, a long time, centuries, really, the whole century of humiliation episode, that was the sign that her country had finally made it. That opening ceremony, displaying Chinese culture, Chinese might, and that amazing show to the world, it showed, wow, finally, that whole period is behind us. And I understood that, the way Chinese people see their country and their government and everything was so much more nuanced than what what I assumed very, very stupidly, that, there was such a thing about, deep attachment to their country, and such a thing as, pride in what China was managing to achieve, and I guess also, some sort of gratefulness for the government as well to have managed to take China out of that bad place. So that was my first sort of realization that something was very wrong in the framework that I used to analyze China, and that was quite early. But then when I came to China, started to discuss with the people, understand the history, the culture, I saw that almost nothing that I had been told was true, really. So I don't know, just to give you another example, a very common myth, for instance, that everyone has heard is the social credit score. I guess you've heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, I've got another account that I may have even posted some videos in Chinese purporting, oh, look, this is the social credit score in action. So I'm interested to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, if you go to China and you ask people, what is your social credit score? No one will have any idea of what you're speaking about. It's just not a reality in people's lives. No one has a score that evolves based on their everyday action. That just does not exist.
So Arnaud,
Yeah.
because I've seen some examples on video, and perhaps you could confirm or dispel them. Where, for example, if you're doing something antisocial like jaywalking, or perhaps you're even avoiding a fare on the metro or something like that, and there are face recognition scanners and videos that then, if they do make a match and they recognize the transgression, that they automatically then take the money out of your bank account. And you don't even have the benefit of a polite notice by email or in the mail. Is that actually happens?
What I have seen is, I mean, it's quite rare, but I've seen some of those jaywalking camera. But as far as I understand, the only thing they do is public shaming. So if you jaywalk, they take a picture of you and then display it, just as a public shaming. So it incentivizes people not to do that. It's not linked to any to your bank account or anything. I mean, jaywalking is actually extremely common in China. I've done it all the time.
And the other thing is your bank your payment services will be blocked from buying, for example, high-speed rail train tickets or using the metro.
Yeah. So what they do have on that true, and I know quite a few. I know some people who are in that situation. Is there is a system of blacklist, which has nothing to do with any score, which is based on a decision by a court of law, where if you do some actions, typically linked to banking fraud. So, for instance, if let's say you borrow money based on fake documents, that's one example. Actually, it's one example of someone I know. They borrowed money from a bank based on fake documentation in order to defraud the bank. So they go in front of a judge in the court that tells them, you're going to be on that blacklist that forbids you to do anything luxury. And taking the plane is considered luxury. Taking fast-speed train is considered luxury. You can still take slow-speed train, and you can take the metro and so on. And basically, you get taken off that blacklist when you've reimbursed what you've the money you've stolen. So that does exist. It's not linked to any social credit score or anything. It's just, you do something. It's an alternative to prison, basically. You do something bad. I don't know what will happen to you if you did the same thing in London. If you defraud a bank, I mean, you're going to go in front of a court. You're going to have a punishment of some kind. I'm not sure what. Maybe you're going to go to prison or something. I don't know. In China, it's you get added to that blacklist, and there are certain number of actions that can trigger that type of punishment. But again, nothing to do with the score. There is no score. It doesn't exist.
When there's something that feeds the prejudices, I have to say that I thought that was true, at least in an experimental sense, that there was a program that was running, and the examples I gave you were, I've seen the videos of those floating around. And of course, if they have like Chinese subtitles, I presume they're authentic as well, because I can't read Mandarin at all, right? And I have no understanding. I can't verify. I just see like it looks like it's straight off Chinese television. So I presume there's some sort of authenticity to that, unless they're debunked or something like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm amazed at the amount of fake news around that. Like, for instance, in France, we have that TV channel called Arte. It's actually a French-German channel. They did a whole documentary around the social credit score. And they actually showed the score on a mobile phone. all written in Chinese, but anyone who knows China knows that this score is the Alipay score that you have inside Alipay, which is a payment method in China linked to Alibaba, which is like, scores that you have in, any app, like in Uber, when the taxi driver scores you, or when you score them, you have a score. It's something that's completely internal to the Alibaba ecosystem, and which has nothing to do with the Chinese government.
That's like an Amazon rating for a buyer.
Exactly, something like that. And so, they did like a 1.5-hour documentary around that, showing something fake. So that's what you deal with when it comes to media representations of China. So it's a bit crazy.
It's fascinating to see because, media companies, they have, let's just say that they don't quite have the resources that they used to have because of the economics collapsing under the weight of the internet and competition through that medium. So I wonder, like, how does a producer get a budget to produce something that's purposefully false? Because you would have to presume that when they go and do their investigation, they would have someone local giving them a translation of what's showing on the app, what's showing on the screen, the meaning of the words and the figures. And yet they purposefully still concocted a narrative that's known to be false. Why would they do something like that?
Well, I think, first of all, like you said, there is no one that can credibly, they get no pushback, right? So first of all, no one really knows China. So very few people will notice that it's in fact false. And those who do will be systematically accused of being like, CCP propagandist and so on. So there is no cost for them to do that, right? Whereas there would be a cost for them to do the contrary, which is, imagine if a journalist, tomorrow says, actually, China is all those bad things that we've been told, actually they're not doing that. Then there will clearly be a cost for that person. They will be like, what happened to you? Like, are you now paid by the CCP and so on? So I think that's part of the answer. It's the incentives are in the wrong way. There was another case just recently on French public TV, which was astonishing to me, where they were doing a show on Decathlon, the famous sports retailer.
Okay,
Decathlon.
I haven't heard of it, but yeah.
Well, it's a big retail brand that sells sports, clothes and equipment, okay. And they wanted to show that they use slave labor in China. There is that whole narrative around Uyghurs and slave labor and so on. And so they went it was two French journalists, they went to a factory that was producing stuff for Decathlon in Shandong province, which is in the north east of China. And they came in front of the factory and they faked that they wanted to go to toilet. And, the factory guard was kind, but maybe a bit naive. And he says, yeah, sure, come into our factory, use our toilet. And they had a hidden camera and they started to tour the factory looking for Uyghurs. But they didn't find any.
The Uyghur, the Muslim population in China.
Yes, exactly. Sorry, from Xinjiang. And they didn't find any. And so they looked from that factory, they found an old recruitment video by the factory owner. And at some point, the factory owner says, Man Xinjiang, which means bonus, like you will get a bonus if you come to work every day, like if you don't get any sick day. That's what it means. But to untrained ears, it sounds very much like Xinjiang. And so they mistranslated the video. I posted about that on Twitter. They mistranslated the video, to make that factory owner say, we welcome people from Xinjiang. And in the documentary, they said since clearly they want people from Xinjiang, it means that clearly they have slave labor and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's crazy, but that's what's going on.
As a tech entrepreneur who's lived in China and started businesses in China, what's been your experience of change in the years that you lived in China with respect to, I guess, the technology ecosystem, the startup ecosystem, but also, I guess, some of their larger national champions as well?
I mean, it's evolved quite a lot. So first of all, when I arrived in 2015, e-commerce was quite developed already. I mean, Alibaba and so on existed, but it's gotten efficient to a stage that people, that has no equivalent in the West. Like, if you buy something often in China, it will arrive to your door within, less than 1 hour. It's crazy efficient. Because they have, an entire logistics ecosystem and a warehouse ecosystem that's incredibly well made, meaning that for most, common items, chances are that it's located in a warehouse, right next to you, and then you have a guy that brings it to you extremely fast. So the whole e-commerce ecosystem in China is incredible, and now they're doing things to make it even more efficient. Like drone deliveries are becoming more and more ubiquitous in China.
Is that a reality already in China?
Yeah. It is a reality. You have those drone stations, in quite a lot of places in big cities. Where you have the drone, landing on top of it, and then your package is taken and stored in some sort of storage place under where the drone lands. So that's a reality. And automated, self-driving deliveries are also very much a reality. If you go to Beijing today, you see those self-driving delivery vehicle, roaming the streets everywhere. It's
how does that work? Is essentially a self-driving car on the regular road that will drive up to a delivery address, and then how do they drop it off?
It's not a self-driving car. It looks kind of like a car, but it's really more like kind of I guess a storage space on wheels is the best way to
just
to
like a
describe
square
it.
box or a cart or something.
Yeah, something like that, exactly. So you have stuff like that, and then I don't know what's also. I mean, China is making a lot of progress in robots, as you probably have seen. Like, for instance, they had a marathon in Beijing specifically for robots, where 20 robot company competed. I don't remember how many of them managed to complete the marathon, but they're already at a stage where they have, more than 10 different robot companies with robots sufficiently advanced to complete a marathon.
So what was the finish time for the marathon?
That's I will need to. I don't remember it. It wasn't too bad. I mean, it was under 3 hours, I think. So yeah, it's decent. Yeah.
Are there any drone taxis in service yet for human beings?
Yes.
For human beings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So Baidu as a company around that, and they're launching it city by city, and I think they started by Wuhan, and basically it's like you call the taxi, it arrives. It's like a normal taxi, except there is no driver. I guess it's a bit similar to Waymo in.
So they are pilotless drones that come and pick you up and take you where you want.
Pilotless cars, yes.
Oh, no, I mean, sorry. When I said drone, I don't mean, for example, driverless cars. I literally mean like a flying quadcopter sort of thing.
Yeah, no. They have those quadcopters. That's on sale. You can buy it as everyday person. But I think they're self-driving to some extent. Like drones are, like those DJI drones are, in order to avoid you doing, any stupid maneuver or something, but not completely. I think you still need to drive them.
Oh, that's fascinating. I think a lot of the discussion around China for me has crystallized in the last 6 months, where I'm like, hang on a minute. I've had this perception of China for the longest time of a sort of low cost, low-end technology manufacturing hub for the world. But actually, over the last 5 to 10 years, it's crept up on us. They've moved up the technological curve, while we've all been stuck with the same misconceptions about them. And in fact, in many respects, the future is being built in China as much as it is in the United States now. And never more did I feel that way. So I spent the New Year's Eve in Miami, and my first time in Miami, and I was not very impressed with the airport. Let me just say that. And then I see a video of a brand new airport built in the 97th biggest city of China, the 97th biggest city, and it was incredible. I think, it puts Heathrow to shame, really, just looking at that. And I'm thinking, if that's the quality of what they're building for the 97th biggest city, I think they've well and truly arrived in terms of infrastructure, public infrastructure, at least.
The infrastructure, I forgot to mention that, but that's also a huge change since I first came to China. I mean, when I first visited the country, you had 0 high-speed train.
So give us a year for that time, because it's important to date the progress of that. When did you first arrive in China, and how quickly did you see that progress in fast rail?
So the first time I visited China was in 2007, and I can't remember when they started to build the fast-speed train, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was like between 2010 and 2012, I can't remember the exact year. And now the network is literally everywhere. I mean, you look at a map of the high-speed train network is amazing. It's absolutely all around the country. Every single city is reached. Even cities that are incredibly difficult to reach, like Lhasa, in Tibet, which is, I can't remember, like 5,000 meters high. So they have a special pressurized high-speed train to go up there. So that's one thing. The highways are absolutely amazing. Like you said, all the train stations, airports, and so on are brand new, done by the world's best architects, spotless. Extremely efficient, like crazy. So yeah, it's I mean, no country in the West comes even close to that.
That's it's mind-boggling that this sort of progress has kind of crept up on us. While if you were to ask the average person in the United Kingdom, they would be completely oblivious to this level of progress. And perhaps, I guess, offer you the same sort of reflexive prejudices that perhaps you initially had all those years ago. And I up until the last 6 months, I've only just started to shed a lot of those prejudices and open my eyes up to the progress that they're making. I guess all of this discussion leads us to something that has become a huge hot topic issue. We're not going to be able to avoid it whenever we talk about great powers and the progress one makes. And, since Trump came into office and he's really taken quite an adversarial approach, not just to China, but to most of the world, with a regime of tariffs that he's announced, and then sort of post hoc tried to rationalize as some kind of grand strategy, multi-dimensional chess play to encircle China, that simply nobody is buying. Like, nobody thought that sounded credible the moment they announced that, because how, you don't build an alliance by smacking everyone in the face, right? And that's exactly what they've done. So how have you seen the announcement of those tariffs and the downstream effects of that so far?
I mean, in China specifically, it's clearly going to have an effect, because I mean, so far I was last week I went to Indonesia with a good friend of mine who is managing director for one of the world's top logistic companies. And what he sees is a decrease of minus 60% of shipments from China to the US. So that's huge. It's basically like an embargo, like almost complete halting of trade. It's very dramatic.
So Chinese products as a percentage of American imports are what, 10 or 15%?
That's a good question. Maybe something that I know the other number, like what percentage of Chinese exports go to the US.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sorry, that is what I meant. Yeah.
No, it's more like 18%. I think of Chinese exports go to the US. I think all in all, exports from China to the US make slightly less than 3% of China's GDP. So 2.9 or something like that. So it's not a huge effect. I mean, it's not going to take China down, but it is still likely to have an impact. That's for sure.
So, what do you think the intention behind these tariffs has been from the beginning?
I mean, it's very hard to say, because if you listen even to Trump, he keeps contradicting himself. So, at one point he says that it's to revive American manufacturing. At another stage, he says that it's to make deals with China or other countries that are targeted by the tariffs. And yet another time, it says it's to raise money with the tariffs themselves. And all of those are kind of mutually exclusive. So if the goal is to remove the tariffs, right, by making deals, then you won't revive manufacturing, because who would invest to build something in the US when they think that the tariff might be removed any day now, and then their business plan doesn't make sense anymore. So yeah, it's very hard to understand what is the objective here. I think given the rhetoric around deals, especially, all the talks about, is Trump speaking with China? Is he not? And so on. I think that is the real purpose, to make deals, basically to establish a new paradigm, that is more favorable to the US. But nothing is less sure that it will work out in the US favor in the end. In fact, I think if you analyze what's happened so far, the US has lost more than it's likely to gain. So just for instance, we're seeing more and more Japan and South Korea get together with China in joint statements or just similar wording to push back against the tariffs. Like when the recent history between those countries, that's quite unexpected.
And so we've seen the opposite effect of what Trump had intended with respect to isolating China through tariffs. And now we've got China, Japan, and Korea almost forming a pact together. How do you see that, particularly the formation for like an investment fund? Is that going to be counter or similar to the IMF? How do you see that?
So what's happened is, I think it was Scott Bessent specifically who said that he had an encirclement plan specifically with Japan and South Korea. That was the plan with the tariffs and so on. And yes, South Korea, China, Japan, and ASEAN, which you shouldn't forget because it's actually a major player as well with all the Southeast Asian countries, like big countries like Indonesia or Vietnam and so on. So they jointly issued a statement basically saying that their utmost priority together was to kind of focus on their region and de-risk themselves from they didn't specifically mention the US, but from the trade difficulties. It was wording like that, which kind of means the US. And then they have mechanisms that those are not new, but they're reinforcing them for financing their own projects in their own currency, issuing bonds in their own currency, and so on. Basically, putting in place the infrastructure for more financial independence and resilience of the region that is not too dependent on the volatility that comes from the US. That's kind of the thinking. And so, obviously, from America's standpoint, that's geopolitically speaking, that's really not good because their whole strategy in Asia and really throughout the world was always divide and conquer. Like if you have some countries in a region on your side of the ledger, like Japan and South Korea, then you prevent exactly this type of thing from happening. The whole region, coming together, that can jointly do actions that could be eventually detrimental to you. That's pretty bad news, and that is a direct effect of the tariffs. And kind of the same thing is happening in Europe as well. With Europe, like we've recently seen that both China and the European Union have jointly agreed to drop sanctions on each other. Like they had sanctions on their officials, like China had sanctions on members of the European Parliament, and the European Parliament had sanctions on some Chinese officials, and they've dropped them. And it is those sanctions at the time, back in 2021, that cancelled a huge trade agreement between China and the EU called the CAI, Comprehensive Agreement on Investment. It's because those sanctions were put in place that both parties decided to drop that. So now you can expect that because those sanctions have been dropped, to have those sort of trade discussions restarting, and maybe that agreement will be back on the table. So, Trump is kind of bringing the whole world together to de-risk away from the US and get more involved with China.
I would even say it started before Trump. I mean, Trump certainly has accelerated that, but under the Biden administration also we had, I guess, the egregious use of US financial sanctions, whether deserved or not, but they've seized and frozen assets belonging to Iran, Russia as well. And that's actually pushed them together to come up with new means with which to settle international trade. They're using Bitcoin, stable coins, and even developing their own payment rails using blockchain, for example. I mean, we're not big advocates of blockchain, so to speak, as Bitcoiners. We like Bitcoin, but for the purposes of this conversation, two nation states developing payment rails independent of the global financial system that's dominated by the United States. One can't help but feel that that's a very obvious and inadvertent own goal that that they've brought upon themselves, essentially and effectively diminishing their own power by not understanding that the technological landscape has changed, and it doesn't actually take too much of an effort for a country the size of Russia and Iran to just get together and fix the sanctions problem of transferring payment and settling international trade. And in addition to that, I think China has also joined the project, and I think the three have some kind of agreement to settle more and more trade with their own currencies. And then there's the issue of literally Bitcoin. I mean, someone told me the other day, China is definitely mining Bitcoin surreptitiously. Iran potentially, but we absolutely know that Russia has been much more open about their move towards Bitcoin in particular, but also acknowledging that there's a use case for other applications, other crypto applications that they would control as a government. So we're not talking about crypto coins and the rest of that. But so I don't think the United States administrations have fully understood and considered the changing payments technology landscape. And I just think it's the 1970s or 80s, and sanctions, the sanctions in the financial system are as effective as they once were. So we haven't really seen an effective dent into the Russian GDP. There was an initial pullback, but they've well and truly recovered from that.
Yeah, I mean, even the contrary. If you look last year, if I'm not mistaken, Russian GDP growth was faster than any other European country, which is crazy to think of after all the sanctions that they're under. On the way I see it is that you're right. It started much before, and I think that during the Biden administration, people started to realize that there was growing divide between the West and the rest. Which started with Ukraine, obviously, where we started to see Russia much more resilient than we thought they would be, and then a lot of countries that we would have expected, in the old world to side unequivocally with the West. Started to show some independence, like India, for instance, which didn't break ties at all with Russia. On the contrary, they started to. If you look at oil sales by Russia, you can see it's dropping from to Europe, and by the same volume, it's increasing to India. And then Europe buys it from India, which doesn't make sense.
So effectively, India has acted as like the global laundry for Russian oil, Russian energy, right?
Exactly.
And there's not a thing that anybody can or is willing to do, because the world needs that energy, essentially, right? And it's just made it a little bit difficult. And I guess there's a little bit of sanctimonious posturing on behalf of the West as well, in saying, well, we're doing something against Russia as well. That's been a fascinating thing to watch, the level of independent action and sometimes defiance emerging from, I don't want to say second tier, but second tier powers rather than second tier countries. They're all worthy countries, but like Turkey, we're seeing Iran, for example, being much more resilient in the face of really quite harsh sanctions. And then India as well. India is quite a large country, saying, actually, we'll make decisions on the basis of our interests more so than yours. And I guess exacerbated by all of that is the Trump tariffs, I think, has accelerated that. And he has been quite forceful in telling NATO members that, saying you need to fund your own defense. And then the tariffs are basically saying, okay, so you need to become defensively independent and self-sufficient. And now the tariffs are waking people up and saying, oh, we need to also be economically independent and self-sufficient as well, because the United States is no longer a reliable partner on defense or economics. I'm not sure, because I see a lot of people online. I don't know if there's a nationalistic further taking hold of the United States, or is it just a very vocal sort of minority on Twitter? But people are sort of openly championing just anything Trump does in this regard, as though tariffs are going to be some kind of magical panacea to all the problems, but not really understanding how the foundation for American hegemony over the last 75 years has actually been eroded, and in many respects instigated by themselves, their own administrations. I don't think they truly grasp that, and they think there's some kind of reward at the end of this tariff rainbow, but it's actually pushing a lot of people, a lot of countries who have historically had really warm and strong relationships with the United States are being pushed away.
Yeah, so probably the most extraordinary thing I've read around that was the official justification for the tariffs by one of Trump's main economic advisor. I think his name is Steve Miran. Miran, I know, is his last name. I can't remember if his first name is Steve, where he basically presented the dollar as a reserve currency as a burden that the US needs to, assume. And since it was a burden that was for the benefit of the whole world, then it was the duty of all the countries of the world to sort of finance the US for carrying this burden, which is an extraordinary, redrawing of reality, because, the reserve status of the dollar is what former French President Valéry Giscard d'Estaing used to call the exorbitant privilege, because basically what it means is that you can buy anything from the world for free because you can print money to infinity. And since you have the reserve currency, everyone needs dollar. Everyone is going to buy your dollar anyway. So you can just print. So the deal is basically, we get your goods, and in exchange, we give you tiny pieces of paper on which there are, images of our president that we print for nothing. That's the deal, right? So how do you arrive at the conclusion that that's a bad deal, on that it's other countries taking advantage of you? That's crazy to me. Like, if anything, it's the US that's taking advantage of the rest of the world, because we're literally subsidizing their lifestyle. Like, if the dollar stops being a reserve currency, then there is no way they can continue to have the same lifestyle. They're going to have, lose a lot of prosperity. That's for sure, right?
It's really interesting because, being predominant, my audience is predominantly a Bitcoin audience, and the predominant geography of Bitcoiners, at least online, are essentially Americans, right? And so there's this realization within our bubble of all the profligate sort of policies and behaviors of American administrations as well. But there's just this tiny corner that's kind of like, yeah, let's go get them with these tariffs, and are really gung-ho about it. And it doesn't make any sense to me that you can have like one side of your brain fully aware of the terrible Federal Reserve policies and the terrible fiscal policies from the administrations, and then suddenly Trump comes up with these tariffs, and they're just also so bullish about it. It doesn't make sense to me, but maybe I need to pay a little bit more attention to the discussion, because I don't see it. Like, I don't see the angle of what these tariffs are supposed to achieve, other than kind of like a stick to whack people or countries with to encourage a renegotiation of all the existing trade agreements. In which case, there's going to be an enormous erosion of trust, because a deal with the United States is never going to be considered a deal. We already know that that's how it treats its adversaries. With Iran, they had the is it JCPOA, the nuclear agreement? Is that? And they had a They enter into an agreement in good faith, and then the next administration just said, "Nah, they're only joking. We're not abiding by that." But if you start treating your allies in that way, then I think an agreement with the United States can no longer be relied on, and it could just be like the starting point until the next agreement, and it's kind of like a ratchet, right? Where whatever you agree to is just going to be the starting point for the next negotiation.
Exactly. And I mean, I think that if Biden really showed the divide between the West and the rest, I think what's clearly happening with Trump is that the West itself is becoming divided, with many countries. I mean, European countries, Japan, South Korea, and so on, just realizing that they need to de-risk themselves from this, crazy behavior and volatility that on that the closer you are to the US, the more you're going to be affected from all of that, and therefore it's in your own interest to put some distance. So yeah, I think probably the only good thing you can say about tariffs is that this is basically Trump just, we have this expression in France that you just kick the ant nest, like
the hornet's nest, we say in English. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Basically, you do something that changes everything, and that's going to reorder the whole system. So we knew that at some point something like that was needed. I agree with that, and I think that this is the start of that, probably, that it will end up to a radically different order to the one we used to have. And I'm actually quite hopeful that it might be better. But if I put myself in Trump's shoes, I don't see a scenario where it's going to be where the US will end up in a better place than it used to be, right? So what doesn't make sense to me is Trump doing that, because it will be very detrimental to the US. So maybe this is, I don't know what's going on in his mind. Maybe it's one way of kind of deflating a bubble before it really explodes, like the Chinese did with real estate. They could see the bubble was growing ever bigger. And at some point they were like, okay, it's going to be very painful. We're going to deflate it now. But if we wait further, then it's going to be immensely painful. So better do that now. So maybe it is a move like that. Maybe that's one explanation. But I don't know if I will give that much credit to Trump. I think the more likely explanation is he just doesn't know what he's doing.
I guess people listening to this discussion and interview might, we started off sort of talking about China, how wonderfully impressive they are and breaking all these misconceptions with, all this progress. And now we're talking about the United States. This is not a pro-China, anti-America discussion. It's really about just bringing new information to the table. And on the discussion about America, from my point of view, it's bewilderment at the utter stupidity, because I would welcome sort of growing multipolarity. I think that's much healthier for the world. I don't want to see America collapse. I think that's absolutely dangerous. I want to see a strong, prosperous, healthy America, because much of the world's well-being depends on the sort of engines of growth and innovation that actually thrive and are domiciled in the United States. So I want to see a healthy United States. It's my utter bewilderment at the stupidity of consecutive administrations with their policies that just don't make any sense to me. And it feels like, and I'm sure there are very cultured, intelligent, knowledgeable people in the State Departments of, various administrations. I'm certain of that. But then we seem to have a bunch of morons who populate the administration and drive policy, which is a completely different thing. It's one thing to have good advice, which I'm sure the State Department is more than capable of delivering. But I don't see administrations actually acting with the sort of statesman-like care and due diligence and responsibility that, I hate to say it, but I see that from the Chinese. Whenever I hear a Chinese spokesperson or government official speaking, it sounds like a highly competent bureaucrat speaking. Whenever I hear Vladimir Putin or their foreign minister Lavrov speaking, they speak in very highly intelligent, coherent terms with a framework that actually makes sense. Whenever I hear an American politician in the administration, either party, I feel like not only do they think I'm stupid, but they have a lack of self-awareness of how stupid they are. And it just leaves me completely bewildered as someone who is very fond of American culture to see them misled by their politicians, because it's not just the Federal Reserve and their profligate fiscal policy, but it's also their strategic nous is completely missing from what they do. And it's kind of like they sit back and rely on, free markets in various sectors of industry to drive that alone. And I think it's an abrogation of responsibility that you do need good policy, right? Free markets can't survive or they can't deliver what they're capable of under the weight of really bad government policy.
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with how politicians are selected in respective countries. So in China, for instance, in order to go to the top, you have a very, very strict selection process. So you start at the bottom. So first of all, you have to be one of the best students in the country. Then you are admitted to the party school. Then you start by managing a village. If you do a good job, then you manage like a small city. If you do a good job, like province, then you go at the national level and so on. That's why, all the folks at the national level you see are actually quite old because they've gone through that whole process. Xi Jinping as well, even though he was the son of a party official, that guy was purged during the Cultural Revolution, and Xi Jinping started literally at the bottom of society. He was living during 7 years in a cave in Shanxi province, working as a farmer. So you can't be lower than this, right? And then he went through he climbed the entire ladder. Whereas, I mean, we all know how Trump was selected. It's quite a different background.
I think there are benefits to both systems. There's a kind of rigidity to how you describe the Chinese system that could be, I guess it can lack an ability to respond to changing times. But by the same token, popularity alone can tend to appeal to the most common, lowest common denominator, which, as we're seeing, it's a kind of exaggerated. It's exaggerated to say it's an idiocracy. It's not quite there, right? But we thought that George W. Bush was the bottom of the barrel, and I'm sorry to say that America has a very deep bench in both excellence and idiocracy as well, because we look back on George W. Bush with a kind of nostalgia because he sounds sensible to what we have in these current times.
Yeah, and it's evolving very fast. Like, I don't know if you're following the tweets of Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Occasionally I see them. I don't follow her because I guard my mental health.
Yeah. Well, that's the surprising thing. Even like 2 years ago or so, she was seen as like, the craziest person in the Republican Party. And now she's like, when you look at her Twitter, she's one of the only voices of reason.
So tell us about where you think she speaks reasonably, because if you weren't following that sort of her, it's not really a transition. More so, perhaps the world has become crazier, or perhaps she's just leaning into certain principles more. But where do you think she sounds reasonable?
I mean, recently there was this law proposal to basically outlaw any criticism of Israel and any boycott of Israel in the US. which is fundamentally un-American, right?
Well, it's not even un-American; it's unconstitutional. Like, American can have cultural connotations, but it's literally in the Constitution, right?
Exactly, it's the Second Amendment, right? And
First Amendment.
Is it freedom of?
What they say is if the first doesn't work. First Amendment is freedom of speech. Second is right to bear arms, right? Yeah.
Maybe.
Let me look that up, because I might be sounding like an idiot right now.
I'm not a constitutionalist, so.
Yes, it guarantees freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press is the First Amendment. Yes,
that's the first. Okay, yeah. So it's anti-constitutional against the First Amendment, and that's basically what she said, right? That she's not going to vote for that because it's fundamentally against what the country is or should be about. I mean, it's nothing groundbreaking to say that, but like most people on our side wanted to vote for it, which just, I think, shows how dramatically the country has deteriorated even from a couple of years ago. Back to your point on the Chinese system being too rigid, that's actually an interesting paradox, because you will think, though, that that's what intuitively makes sense, indeed, because it is true that Chinese officials are extremely formatted. Like they all, they all learn the same thing. They all go through a similar life experience, and they're promoted based on the same criteria, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, China can make really, really dramatic moves, completely pivoting the country, which is actually what we're witnessing for a couple of years, where they decided to move out from being an export-led economy that was, that had real estate, with real estate as such a huge part of the economy. At some point, it was like 30% of China's GDP. They've decided to completely pivot economic model. To do that, that's the contrary of rigidity. You need an immense amount of flexibility to pivot a country the size of China, but they're doing it.
But to what extent has that been successful? Because the goal, or perhaps the objective of China developing more of a consumption society or a domestic consumption economy has been sort of floated for the longest time, but it seems to be a lot of cultural inertia to get Chinese people to spend more. They seem to be much more of a savings-oriented culture. So how to what extent has that been successful?
I mean, the savings part, if you follow consumption, it's increasing faster than industry or other sectors of China's GDP, but the increase is not dramatic. It's going to take a lot of time. And you're right that culturally it is a savings culture. Even if you look at Singapore, which is 70-80% Chinese, ethnic Chinese, even though they have all the safety nets that you can imagine. I mean, Singapore, probably, I think, the country with one of the highest GDP per capita. I mean, you have everything you need in Singapore. Still, the Chinese there still save, I think, 35% on average of their income, like extremely high savings rate. So it goes to show that it's something that's deeply ingrained in the Chinese culture, and that won't be easy to change. But that's not really what the pivot is about. It's more about moving up the value chain and becoming a technology power, like being saying we don't want to produce for the rest of the world anymore. We want to develop our own brand, our own technology, do innovation ourselves, so that instead of producing BMW cars for the German, we're going to have our own cars, or instead of producing Apple phones for the Americans, we have our own phones, and so on and so forth in literally all the industries. So that's more the pivot, I would say.
So sort of like consumer excellence for the domestic sensibilities, right?
Not only the domestic, I think they want to also export those products, those brands. They want Chinese brands to lead the world and compete with Western brands.
So the most obvious Chinese brand, consumer brand that has really dominated the world is TikTok, for example.
Yeah.
How have you seen the whole the issue with TikTok US, the Trump administration, I guess what would you call it, a spin-off? It was a forced sale to US interests instead.
Yeah.
And so that really emerged, I guess, sometime last year as an issue that was pushed heavily through Congress. How do you see that? How is that perceived in China? And do they understand the motivations for something like that?
So, I mean, it's the calls to ban TikTok or force it to sell have been there for a long time. But last year, what happened is that there was a good justification to sell it to Congress with Israel, basically, because then, you could make the case that China is trying to brainwash our young population with anti-Israel propaganda, and since Congress is so the Israel lobby is so strong, and Congress is so eager to please Israel, that was a great selling argument. But I don't think that the real reason is that. The real reason, I think, is simply because they don't want a competitor for their own company. It's simply economics, right? Like they have the top social media companies. Before TikTok, they had all of them. All the top social media companies were Americans. It's bad news for them if the Chinese are entering that and starting to compete and even outcompete their own companies. So I think you shouldn't look further than that. That is the real that is the real justification. And then they try to sell it in one way or the other. But at heart, that's the prime motivation. And I think that the Chinese also understand that. That's the way it's viewed in China. It's like, we started to compete with you, and of course you want to ban us because you don't like the competition.
Well, they have a similar domestic policy with respect to tech platforms anyway, don't they? Because Facebook doesn't operate there. I think Google, I don't know what their situation is.
No, so it's a bit different. Basically, the deal is that you can compete in China as a Western tech company. Many of them do, like Microsoft. No Microsoft product is banned. Even social media like LinkedIn, none of that is banned. The condition is that you need to respect Chinese law, which is very drastic. So, for instance, when it comes to search engines for Google, they will need to very heavily censor their results. Bing, so the Microsoft equivalent, does it, and they're allowed in China, which goes to show that, if you follow the rule, you're allowed. So that's for search engine. For both Facebook and Twitter, the reason why they got banned is actually linked to Xinjiang and the Uyghurs, because there was a huge terror attack in Urumqi and in Kashgar, the main cities of Xinjiang, that killed hundreds of people. Like, it was a very, very big thing. Like, basically China's 911 equivalent, very traumatizing for the nation. And those guys use Facebook and Twitter to communicate, because they were they thought they would be, secure from spying from the Chinese government on that, and they were right. And China went to Facebook and Twitter and said, you need to give us all the details of those users as per Chinese law. It's the same in the US. If you have a terror attack committed in the US and the guy uses whatever Facebook to do it, then Facebook has an obligation to communicate the details to the US government. But both Facebook and Twitter refused to do that. And that was the end of them, basically.
Fair enough.
They were bad.
Yeah, I guess if you have a court order, for example, in the United States or UK, and even oftentimes they're secret orders as well, and they can't really. Yeah. There's not really much they can do about that. There was a time during the negotiations for the forced sale of TikTok US that it was actually banned for a time. And a whole bunch of young people in America download the Chinese equivalent called Red Note. I found that a fascinating. It wasn't a clash of cultures, but it was a meeting of cultures, and then the subsequent memes and videos that populated Twitter at the least. What did you think of that?
Yeah, I think that was beautiful because at the end of the day, what I want, what I'm trying to do in my kind of advocacy work on Twitter and so on is simply more understanding between cultures, on more people-to-people exchange. What I really don't like to see is all the misunderstanding, all the ignorance that at the end of the day feed hatred. I'm deeply convinced that the more you ignore something, the less you know about something, the more you're prone to hate it. And so anything that favors or helps Chinese and Westerners, just interacting with each other, I think is amazing. So it was really beautiful to see that, and that's why I'm so disappointed in efforts to ban TikTok or forbid anything Chinese in the US, because it goes completely in the wrong direction, in the direction of even more ignorance, which will feed even more hostility, even more tension, and so on. It's not the way we should. It's not the direction we should take at all.
Yeah, I quite agree with that. And that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk to you, because you're quite often people who are online and they advocate for China, they often do work for the Chinese government, or they have very strong sort of communist sympathies as well. I mean, you're like a technology entrepreneur who's made enough money to sort of fight off feared accusations of being a closet communist as well. So like it comes with credibility, as well as having lived there as well, So it's one of the reasons why I wanted to invite you for the discussion as well. There was just something on my mind. Oh yeah, so one of the funny things that I've seen as a result of these tariffs is the sudden proliferation of videos from China about these sort of buy direct from the factory, you're getting ripped off everywhere else. And watching, I find the Chinese have a really dry and direct, and sometimes direct, but also sometimes very subtle sense of humor that really appeals to me. And their videos have been quite a joy to watch, actually. What do you
have you watched Tony? Tony the
I don't know the names. I don't know the names, but I've seen many of them. They're hilarious. What do you make of these videos of sort of these supposed direct from factory sales to the public?
Those videos have always been there, and actually, I think it's more an effect of the tariffs that made them surface. But I've seen those videos for forever, so I don't think there was a sudden surge. There was a sudden surge of attention on those videos and on any sort of mechanism that could help escape the tariffs. But it's not like there was some sort of coordinated effort, I think, to produce those videos or anything. It's just suddenly those guys. So those types of services have always existed, and suddenly those guys got the jackpots, basically.
Yeah, I guess because those sorts of things, you're right, they've always been there, but unless you were looking for them, most people are oblivious. I still couldn't name you any of those websites right now, but the people I know who are into fashion, handbags, high-end items, they absolutely know all of those websites now.
Actually, on the handbag thing, there was actually a lot of lies in those videos. So, for instance, they kept saying that French luxury bags are made in China.
I wanted to pick up on that because what is the meaning of all of this for French luxury now? Like us, it's supposed to be as a sort of clapback at American tariffs, but most of the world's luxury items are owned by essentially like a French conglomerate.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I thought all those videos made little sense. So first of all, why go after France? Like what did we do to you guys? On plus, most of those were lies actually, because none of the luxury French bags are made in China. I know that for a fact. They're made in France, and that's partly why they're so expensive.
But so made in whatever country can have all sorts of different meanings, right? It could be materials were imported and then stitched together in France. Is that made in France, or does it have to be literally from the start to the end, everything is made? Sometimes items are finished in certain countries, right? And then they say, oh, we're made in France, made in Italy, such, because those countries have a certain cachet when a product is carrying the label of craftsmanship from there.
Honestly, I think even from the supply chain standpoint, most of it remains, if not only in France, in the vicinity as well. Like, for instance, most of the leathers come from Italy, which is very famous for that. So it's a fairly local supply chain. And in fact, a lot of those videos were not actually outright lies, but were often misinterpreted. Like there was a very viral video of a guy saying around the Birkin bag. I can't remember which brand is the Birkin bag. Is it Dior? Is it Chanel?
Hermes, isn't it?
Hermes, yeah, it's Hermes, exactly. He was not saying that they made the Birkin bag. What he was saying is they can make an exact similar quality copy of the Birkin bag. So he wasn't claiming that the Birkin bag was made in China, but it was interpreted that way by many people. So yeah, that whole thing was a bit bizarre to me. Of course, there are plenty of things that are made in China. In fact, China is the only country that makes all the types of products that are classified in the so-called HS codes. So literally everything is made in China. And of course, when you go direct to the factory, for most things, you can get amazingly cheap price. That's the way I personally shop, actually.
How do you do that? So how would you buy from China and you're looking for quality, for example? Anything, apparel. Let's just start with something really basic, apparel.
So apparel, Taobao is, I guess, the best go-to platform, which is part of Alibaba Group.
What is it called? Taobao?
Taobao. Taobao. I don't know if they have an English version, but it's probably the leading e-commerce app in China today. They're seen as relatively high quality because they do a lot of verification. So you can be sure that whatever you buy on them has gone through some checks. So for apparel, you will go to them and you can find, really, really affordable stuff. And what I personally do since I live in Malaysia, I mean, my wife does most of it, is that we order everything from China, from Chinese e-commerce website. We send it to a warehouse in Guangzhou. And once a month, we have a container boat coming to Malaysia with all our orders for that month. So that's the way we do it with a group of other Chinese family here in Kuala Lumpur. Because it's just so much cheaper and often it's better quality.
If I wanted to start a line of high quality merchandise, and when I say high quality, like I literally mean really high quality, of the like that you might spend quite a lot of money buying from a very well known brand in London or Paris or whatever. How would I go about sourcing a reliable partner to make that in China? Because when I go onto the apps and if I type in high quality hoodie, it's just streams of bullshit. Like you can just see I have a different sensibility, and when I look at something visually, it's not presented in the way that I would expect something being presented. But how do I actually qualify a potential supplier?
I think probably the best thing you should do is go in person to a place called Yiwu. Yiwu, which is the world's biggest market, where virtually all the factories in China have a stand. And that place is huge, like you have no idea. It's, I think, the world's biggest building. So I remember I went there one day, and I was just in the place where socks factories in China have their stand. And I literally spent half the day just walking through all the socks factory stands. Like, it's that big. And they have all the world's products represented there. So you could literally walk during months and not have seen everything. So that's why you would need to go. Of course, you will need to know about, textile to be able to judge if something is quality or not. But if you want to find a factory in China, they're all there.
But that sounds quite a daunting thing to do, is go into a building that's possibly one of the world's biggest buildings, and you're like, where do I even start? How do you navigate a place like that just to find the sorts of things that you're looking for, let alone to then filter them out for quality and everything else?
Well, then, the way I would personally do it is to look at who other brands use, that brands or companies that I trust, or people.
How do we find that out?
Well,
brands don't like to publicize which factories they use, and even which regions and provinces they manufacture, and they want that a tightly kept secret, and they just want you to see the facade of, the shop window, for example, and labeling.
Yes, but I think when you start speaking with, there are plenty of consultants or even factories themselves. Like, it's an open secret, right? Everyone knows which factory work for which brand, and it's not that difficult once you get to speak a bit with the people in the industry. It's not that difficult to understand the landscape.
Sure. Yeah. I'm still daunted. It feels to me like, okay, because I know there are consultants who help Western investors and buyers navigate that, and then I guess the thing that comes to my mind is how do I know if they're going to be legit as well? For example, middlemen are notoriously shady as well, right? And they can disappear into the night, and I have no way of even knowing who they were really, let alone enforcing any kind of contract or anything like that. It feels like it's just something that if you're going to do, you commit to it, and then you spend the time accumulating the knowledge and becoming familiar with the whole sort of value chain as well.
There is no app that I know of that tells you, that can reliably tell you that factory is, always trusted for this type of high quality product and so on. I mean, there is Alibaba. It's an app typically for factories and suppliers and so on, they have a rating system, but at the end of the day, it's credible to the extent that e-commerce rating system is, right?
We touched on sort of governance before, comparing the two sort of pathways for the rise of politicians in China and the emergence of, I guess, popularly elected officials in the United States and democracy in general. But what do you say about the growing acceptance of places that are not even democratic, like Dubai, for example, amongst Westerners? I have been very surprised by many Western women coming back from Dubai and just being like, I can't wait to go there. It's so clean. It's so safe. I don't have to worry about a single thing about being harassed or being accosted or anything like that, which really surprised me because, it doesn't really hold much of an appeal for me to spend time there even for a holiday. And then when I hear Western women, particularly like with many of the prejudices about living in a Muslim society, coming back from a place like Dubai and singing its praises for all of the reasons that, one would presume that we would enjoy those sorts of liberties in a city like London. But like Dubai, I'm hearing British women coming back from Dubai and feeling more comfortable, safe and free to enjoy themselves. Notwithstanding, democratic political freedoms, but just to be there and to walk around and enjoy the day-to-day activities. What do you think is at play there? What do you think is happening that they feel undermined in a city like London and safe in a place like Dubai, given the preconceptions of the two cities?
I mean, I've been to both. I lived in London. I spent just a few days in Dubai. I will not live in Dubai, that's for sure. But I can see where they're coming from. It's also something that many women say after living in China, that it is incredibly valuable to them to be in a place where they feel totally safe. It's hard for me, and probably for you as well, to judge that because we don't live that every day. But I think from a woman's standpoint, even London can be quite a daunting experience. Like you get accosted a lot, catcalled. My wife actually got mugged in London, got her bag stolen when she was.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, when she was biking. It's not that safe, actually. And I would never let my daughter, just walk around the streets of London at night alone. That's just, I think that's too dangerous, especially in certain parts of the city. Whereas I would have zero hesitation to let her do that in China because I know it's perfectly safe. So I can see the value in that. I think it also shows that it's all good to have high-minded principles around governance, but when your daily experience is not that good, is difficult, and you don't feel safe, and so on. Like, what good does it do? At the end of the day, it's that's what matters the most, right? Do you have freedom in your daily life to do what you want to do? Like, that's also something else that I often say about China. That it's true that China has less individual freedom than the West, but I think it's wrong to define freedom as solely individual freedom. I think freedom is larger than this. Like, freedom from fear, what we just spoke about, matters, right? It's a form of freedom. If you're afraid to even go out in the street, how free are you really?
Yeah, the first obligation of any government is to ensure public safety, right?
Exactly.
Without that, you can't have anything else. You can't build upon that.
Yeah, exactly. Or there is also freedom from need. Like, more and more, at least in France, the the share of the population living in poverty is growing and is reaching, very bad levels. And when you go to Paris, you see homelessness everywhere. It's quite sad, really. When you're homeless, how can you be said to be free? Like you're slave to your own condition in a way. Like you're struggling for survival.
Yeah, I agree with that. We have a lot of people in the Bitcoin space who are very strong on sort of capitalistic principles and even libertarian principles. And I have some sympathies with their views as much as I do. Having grown up, for example, working class parents, poor working class parents, and I do think that it is incumbent on government to alleviate desperation. The government doesn't owe anybody a living. You've still got to initiate. You've still got to go out there in the world, and you've got to try. And you can't just sit on your ass. I don't like sort of people who live idly and expect to be served. But by the same token, system-induced desperation is a government responsibility to alleviate. Yeah. And I think we're getting an increase of that in Western nations. And as a result, more and more people are looking around and saying, well, what good is my democracy when I can't go out into the city and walk with my daughter in the street during the daytime? And I think they're right to question that. Yeah. Not that I'm advocating for the abandonment of democracy, more or less living up to those ideals.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think it's incompatible with democracy. Sure. What I'm saying is I actually don't have a favorite system. I'm agnostic. I just want what works. The two best systems I've seen in my life, because I lived in both countries, are the Swiss system. I think the Swiss are really good.
Can you describe that for us? Because they have a more decentralized, localized system, don't they? Can you describe that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, so the Swiss system is basically extreme democracy, where it is citizens that vote for almost everything. It's a referendum-based system where any citizen can initiate a referendum either at the local or the national level to change something that they don't like. And then, of course, you have a party system where some party will go behind, one outcome and another behind another. And you have an entire debate, national debate around this. And of course, you need a certain amount of backup for your initiative in order for it to actually lead to a vote. So they have some rules. But it's, I think it's a very interesting system where they have that. At the end of the day, you feel as a citizen that you're really in control of your own country, right? The president is rotating, so there is no, almost cult of personality like. Features like you're seeing with Trump, where it's
when you say the presidency rotates, what is their maximum term?
I think it's 1 year rotating between 7 people. I think I can't remember exactly the rule, but it's something like that, where you have a council with 7 heads, and they're each rotating, holding the role for 1 year. Don't quote me on this too.
It sounds more like a ceremonial rather than administrative role, though.
It's more ceremonial, but they need to represent the country abroad, and they have some role, right? And then it's extremely decentralized. With Switzerland is divided into canton, so it's really a lot of very local governments that know best what's happening locally, with most decisions really in the country taken at the local level, with a lot of freedom around what you want to do locally. And then you have competitions between the canton for, attracting companies and so on. So all in all, it's done in a very, very smart way. And you really feel democracy. And in fact, when there is that survey that's done every year, I think, by a foundation called I think it's called the Alliance for Democracy or something like that. It was founded by an ex-NATO chief. And the past 4 years, the two countries where people most replied that they felt they were living in a democracy are Switzerland and China. Yeah, which really I guess it's my impression too that having lived in both.
What do you think that's a reflection of? Do you think that's a reflection of the political process, or that people feel their needs are being met by government?
Yes, I think that is exactly it. It's two very different systems, the Swiss and the Chinese. But at the end of the day, both people feel hurt in different ways, and they feel that the country is progressing in the way they want it to progress. I guess in a way that makes sense to them. And also in that particular survey, they also ask more detailed questions to people on what exactly motivates their votes. And equality in the face of law places a huge role. Like, people don't want to see that there is, set of rules for the elites and a different set of rules for them. That's extremely toxic for democracy. In China, people certainly don't have that impression, because almost every day you hear about an official or a billionaire that gets sent to prison or even executed. And in Switzerland, neither. It's already such a small country. You can see your leaders even in person, and you can see that there is no, the rules are very strict. There is no preferred treatment. So that matters a lot as well.
It's really interesting that those are the two countries who topped the survey, because when it comes to scale, they couldn't be more different, right?
Yes.
Quite often, I'm one of those people that I think most ideologies break down at various points of scale. Some break down at the small scale. Many of them break at the middle to larger end of the scale. And I'm curious, how do you think a Swiss model could potentially be employed in a larger country like the United Kingdom or France, for example? Or could it? Do you think it's beyond the scale of a country like that? And then I guess the next question is, how is China managing this level of satisfaction?
So I think the one similarity between the Swiss and the Chinese system, and that's also a huge misperception that people have when it comes to China. They think that, communism means centralization, that because it's a communist country, Xi Jinping takes all the decisions, basically, which couldn't be further for the truth. Actually, China is one of the most decentralized countries in the world.
Okay, you're going to have to break that down for us, because a lot of people are probably coughing up their coffee right now, spitting it out. And so what do you mean by that?
I mean, first of all, money speaks a lot. So if you look at how the Chinese budget is being spent, 80% of the expenses are at the local level. So be it, cities, provinces, and so on. Whereas 20% of the budget, only 20% of the budget is controlled by the central government. If you compare with France, my country, it's the exact opposite. It's 80% central, 20% local. The US is in the middle. It's even though it's a federation, still is 50% central, while federal government, and 50% local, states, and so on and so forth. The way the Chinese system works is it's often called the mayor economy. I don't know if you've ever heard that term, where basically local officials have a lot of autonomy within boundaries. So there are some high-level goals that are set in, for instance, the 5-year plan. Like we want to, become a very innovative country by 2030 or something like that. Like it remains quite high level, and then there is extreme competition between localities with a lot of empowerment because they control a lot of the budget to run experiments, to run initiatives in order to make that objective happen. And really, what people misunderstand about the CCP, actually in China it's called the CPC, the Communist Party of China, is that its fundamental role is a HR organization. It's an HR organization where it looks at all those officials, millions of officials in China, and looks at their performance and control who gets promoted in function of how well they achieved their objectives. So if, for instance, you did great and you have extremely innovative province that produce some tech champions that are admired in the whole of China or in the world and so on, you're probably going to get promoted and, as a next step, maybe be on the Politburo or something like that. So that's more the way the system works. It's actually extreme decentralization with a lot of autonomy, a lot of competition between everyone, but still the central government decides on the objectives and runs the role of an HR organization to decide who gets promoted. That's kind of the organization. And it's very scalable. I mean, it works for a country the size of China.
How does the citizenry, what mechanism does the citizenry have for feedback into the system?
So there are quite a few, more than what people expect. So one example I always give, which is something I find really cool, is they have this phone number, 12345, that you can dial wherever you are in China if you have any complaints related to anything that the government can solve. I've myself used it a couple of times. And they have an obligation to complete your case. So they cannot just leave you hanging and say, no, we won't deal with you. Like, of course, your complaint needs to be legitimate and have something to do with what the government can do. But if it is, they have an obligation to open your case and solve it. Not always to your satisfaction, of course. Sometimes you can be wrong, but basically, your complaint will be dealt with and you will have a resolution of some sort in a few days. So that's one quite powerful, very concrete feedback mechanism. And then you need to remember that the Chinese Communist Party has 100 million members, which are everywhere in society. They are the main, organ vehicle to give feedback to the government, because they live, among the people, and so they can see exactly what's happening. So that's another powerful one. And you also have regular surveys. You have I guess those are the main ones, I would say.
So since we've seen, I guess, quite a lot of wealth accumulate through Chinese tech companies, Chinese property development companies, is the CCP being subjected to the same kind of pressures, shall we say, that the United States Congress and the political process is open to with respect to lobby groups and lobby funding as well? So how does that work? I would imagine in a rigid system like that, that there may be certain opportunities for very wealthy people to be able to get their way within the party.
Yeah, there used to be. China, up until fairly recently, was quite corrupt in that way. But that's really I would say the major change that Xi Jinping actually brought to the table. That is corruption clampdown that really put an end to this, at least from what I could see, where there is really, it even went to the opposite, where there is even fear in the eyes of a lot of those officials to even have the appearance of anything resembling corruption. So
what are they fearing? So why would they be fearful of that? What could happen to them if they were found taking bribes, for example?
Like, they go to prison, they get stripped of their role, and in the worst cases, they can get executed. So it's pretty bad. You don't want to do that. And just to give you an example, I was in Sichuan last year, and I met a tourism official, basically like the head of tourism for Sichuan province. And I just as a gesture of thank you for him to agree to meet us, I just bought him some tea, which is, nothing. It's just a pack of tea, right? And he refused it. Because even that could be seen as something, a bit questionable. So that's the atmosphere right now in China. Of course, you still have corruption. You can never completely eliminate it, but it's really been day and night before Xi, where it was completely corrupt, now where it's basically on par with advanced economies.
So I guess, with my Western mindset, I have to ask, what's in it for these politicians to dedicate themselves to the public service? Are they very well paid? Are they extremely well paid? I have no idea about what their sort of material conditions, compensation is like. So what is the benefit for someone who dedicates themselves to, public office like that?
I often compare the Communist Party of China to almost like a religious order. I think that's the best comparison, like the Jesuits or something, where a lot of them, I guess, do it for the prestige. First of all, there is a lot of that. Like, if you're a top official, always in China's history, it's been the most prestigious thing that you could do. That's your path into the history books and so on and so forth. I think that shouldn't be underestimated. You're not very highly paid, but there are a lot of perks that come with your job. Like, your kids will have maybe better access to schools. You can live in special housing, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I guess it's not dissimilar to France when you think about it. Like, in my country, politicians are not very well paid either. I think Macron gets a salary of 100K or something like that a year. Which, I mean, you're the president of a major country is really
That's
not
true. But we've also seen, is it Lilian Bettencourt? Yeah, with her
her
donation and the patronage that someone like her can afford.
Exactly.
Do we have a similar system of patronage in China, for example, where essentially it's like these newly emerged billionaires are pulling the strings behind the scenes?
it probably exists to some extent, but I'm pretty sure that it's less the case than it is in the West, because those guys are communists at the end of the day, on their whole the whole ideology is that the state needs to be above capital. That's the thing, that the governments, the state ultimately needs to have the decision for where society needs to head, instead of capital deciding that for society.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I really wanted to ask about, I guess there's a capitalist engine within a within a country that is ruled by ostensibly a communist party, right? Because the idea of communism that we all grew up knowing about was essentially everyone is equal and essentially impoverished, right? But everyone is equal, and there's a central committee that runs absolutely every dimension of society and the economy. We don't see exactly this kind of model. There's clearly capitalism in China. We've seen the accumulation of capital, and we're seeing free enterprise, we're seeing competition. And so is the CCP still, do they still believe that they are themselves communists? Or is there some new definition that they've made up to sort of reconcile the balance of what the origins of the CCP were and the current practices as in deploying a capitalist engine for the prosperity of the nation?
So, full disclaimer: I'm not a specialist of communism theory, but from what I've seen on the very few discussions that I've had with some officials that I've met through the years, is yes, they really believe that China is still communist, but they call it communism with socialism with Chinese characteristics is the official name, where I guess the definition there is that they really believe that the market has a role to play, but within control of the state, where the state, the government, the people ultimately have decision control for where society should be headed. Let me give you a very clear example of that happened not a long time ago, where from one day to the other, the Chinese government decided to completely ban the entire online education industry. And we have plenty of startups around that, even some very big ones, because education, makes a lot of money in China. Education is very important in China. So you had some major companies, billion-dollar companies, that were just, forbidden completely, wiped out from one day to the next. Why? Simply because they thought they were bad for society, in that it led to inequality between kids, where you had some kids whose parents could afford all those online tutor service. Those stuff can get pretty expensive. And those kids had a huge advantage compared to, those poor kids in the countryside whose parents, just couldn't afford that. And it was also bad for the kids, because on top of school, their parents were putting them in those tutoring sessions until often late at night and so on. It didn't leave them time to be kids, to just go play outside with their friends and so on. So there is nothing good about this sector. We just banned it from one day to the next, and that was it. And it's been banned since. So that's a very clear illustration of what exactly that means. It's doesn't matter if you're a billion-dollar company, if you're a billionaire or extremely powerful or anything. Just if you're bad for society, for the direction that the people want society to go to, then you basically have no place in society, and there is nothing you will be able to do.
I know you mentioned the robot marathon before, and it made me think about China's technical advances especially in the areas of chip manufacturing, where they've, another sort of own goal by the United States in underestimating what they regard as their main global competitor, where they just didn't, if we just ban them, then their advance will stagnate. But they've gone off and actually developed and innovated their own industry and pretty much caught up. They're not quite there yet, but the rate of improvement in their manufacturing processes is such that, it's only a matter of time. It could be 6 months, it could be 12, 18 months, but they're essentially going to get there, and perhaps we'll even surpass them. And also in the field of AI, artificial intelligence, we had, the leading company, OpenAI, the CEO, telling an Indian audience, essentially, don't even bother, you're just not going to catch us. We've got too much of a head start. And then within 6 months, DeepSeek releases their first model that just blows away what was then the leading open AI model. So, is there any technological defensive moat for the United States when it comes to China, or has China really climbed up that technological innovation curve to the point where it has all of the expertise necessary, pretty much, to compete and eventually surpass what the United States has right now?
Yeah, I think
it's over.
No, I think probably the best thing the US should have done, which it didn't do. In the case of semiconductors, it's just bizarre, because if there was one thing that China was importing a lot, it was semiconductors. They were importing, I can't remember the number, but it was a crazy number, like $300 and $400 billion a year worth of it, more than oil. They were importing more semiconductors than oil. So if you want to reduce the trade deficit you have with China, that's a clear thing you want, right? You want them, you have an advantage over them on this. You're sending a shitload of those to them. You want that to continue. But no, you decided to ban them from buying, the key thing they wanted to buy from you, and then you complain about the trade deficit. You actually accelerate the pace at which they will catch up with you, because if the US had kept selling, the top NVIDIA chips on so on and so forth to China, if China had felt extremely secure in that regard, then they're not going to put tens of billions of dollars into making sure they catch up. They have other priorities to focus on, right? But the fact that you try to embargo them, to cut them off from something which is clearly very important, of course they will put all those efforts to catch up on to eventually they will get there. They're not stupid. They have tens of thousands of PhDs and so on. They will get there. So it makes no sense. So I think the right approach with China is very much not to try to cut them off or contain them or anything. On the contrary, is to integrate with them, to give them security so that they don't need to, right? Same thing for another good example is the space station. Like, the US passed this law banning NASA to have any sort of contact with China, effectively banning them from the International Space Station. So what did China do? Now they're the only country in the world to have their own space station, right? Wouldn't we have been better if we all collaborated together, the US, Europe, Russia, and so on, in building, which is a very good symbol for humanity, an international space station where we all come together and declare that space is a common endeavor rather than a place where we keep our division. So yeah, it's obviously better to do things in a collaborative way, and in the end, each party is gonna win more than if we do things divided.
Well, it's an interesting thing that the United States increasingly has not just viewed China as a competitor, but also as a national security threat as well.
Yeah.
Do you think there was ever the possibility that it would be viewed as a potential partner? Because in reality, it is a partner, right? Logistically, in terms of trade, I think so. I saw a chart of the U.S. military-industrial complex output, and then some kind of map laying out actually which output was dependent on Chinese manufacturing or input in some way. And essentially it was everything. Everything relies on some kind of essential Chinese input into the manufacture of some kind of weapon or systems or, tank, any kind of vehicle that the US military requires for its defense. And it's like they're already a partner. So why are they being spoken of as a political threat and a political rival? The noises coming out of China I've perceived them to be internally focused, but do you think that's kind of changed with the Belt and Road Initiative and the deployment of soft power?
It's interesting to look back at China's history. I think China is a country that understands itself a lot through its own history and constantly refers to it, constantly learns, decides how to act in the future based on how it acted in the past. And as such, it's very important to study the history in order to predict the future of what China might do. China has zero history of, trying to convert countries to its own culture or system or ideology or anything, or religion. Like at no point in history you had Taoist monks going to, Europe or anything to try to convert people to Taoism or anything like that. It's just not in their culture. China's actually their instinct is always wars, to close themselves off from the rest of the world. That's what they always do when they feel insecure, or even when they feel secure. It's like they always put walls around them, like the Great Wall of China, the Great Firewall for the internet. They always have walls to protect themselves from the world, and they will not try to influence the rest of the world. So I don't think that we can fear that at any stage China is going to want to, the way the Soviet Union behaved, to convert the world to be like them, to remake the world in their image. Like that will never happen. Of course, what they want, and which is the spirit of the BRI and their diplomacy and so on, is they want recognition. I think among the Chinese people and among the government, there is a very big need for acknowledgement of China as a peer, not the paternalistic view that we all too often have about the country as this, inferior, third world dictatorship or whatever. They want to be judged fairly, basically, equally with. They want the US to acknowledge, okay, you're a peer, you're equal to us. we're going to speak to you with respect, and so on and so forth. So I think that's one key objective. And of course, another objective is, the rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, which means more prosperity and so on and so forth, which they see as I think the spirit of the BRI is a bit like the Marshall Plan that the US had with Europe, where Europe was in ruins after the end of the Second World War, and so the US put had the Marshall Plan to sort of rebuild Europe, not in a kind way because they wanted to be nice with Europe, but because they understood that the Europeans were their future customers, right? That trade with Europe was going to be extremely important, and that was going to fuel the prosperity of the US, but also be good for Europe. It was going to rebuild Europe and also fuel their prosperity. So I think that's the goal with the BRI, to build the global south, the infrastructure, to ensure that they have this base of customers, of partners for trade and so on, in a way that is mutually beneficial, where the prosperity of both China and countries in the global south get improved.
Yeah, I think that echoes I think Professor Mearsheimer's view that the West and the United States in particular should reassure China that, when the time comes, and it truly has come, but he's been saying this for some time now, that, your place is ready amongst the leading nations of the world. Unfortunately, that lesson has, or that directive has not sort of been heeded. That lesson has gone over the heads of many people. And now, I guess if you treat someone as an adversary for long enough, they eventually have to oblige, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it's the famous security dilemma in geopolitics, where if you act as if someone is an adversary, then they will think you have hostile intention towards them, and then they need to react to that, and then you feel validated in your assessment that they are an adversary, and then there is a sort of escalation ladder, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there is a lot of that going on.
Arnaud, we've had a fantastic conversation. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your opinions with us. I always love to have people who have strong opinions, and as a result of their experience and their travels around the world. And it's been a real pleasure to host you for this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Archie.
I really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Me too.